Hi, Heather. Welcome to the Integrative Health Coach Success Podcast.
Hi, Julia. Thank you for having me today.
Yes, our pleasure. I'm excited to kind of chat further with you. It's always exciting when I have another Equal Life health coach that we get to talk to, because even though I know all of you well, I always learn a little something more, and it's always good to connect. And I think it's good for our listeners to hear a little bit more about us. So thanks for being here.
Of course.
What I would love to do to start is, could you kind of share with our listeners what you're currently doing within the Equal Life company?
Sure. So I started with Equal Life back in November of 2021. They were looking for a health coach and lab accounts manager. So as the lab accounts manager, my role is really to act as a liaison between our lab companies and Equal Life, work on our requisition forms for updating them, look into new testing if we want to consider new lab testing to offer. And then also I review all the labs that come into Equal Life for certain markers we call lab alerts. And then more recently, we are transitioning over the labs portion to our app. So that's going to be a near future thing to get excited for. So more of the behind the scenes with the labs. And then as a health coach, I was doing the normal things as everyone else, as far as coming up with wellness protocols and meeting with clients. But last month I did take a little step back for a short amount of time right now to kind of focus more on being a mom. So yeah, that's what I'm doing now.
Okay, great. Yeah. And we'll dive into a little bit of that transition and kind of how I think it's important to, highlight as far as, what it means to be a mom and also be working, and kind of motherly instincts that I think we can have a great conversation about. So we'll go back to that in a second.
Yeah.
Would you share with everybody kind of how you started in this space? I know you haven't always been a health coach, but what were you kind of doing before you came to Equal Life? What did that all look like as far as how you transitioned and whatnot?
Yeah. So I think that everyone that ends up in the health and wellness arena has kind of their story of either hitting rock bottom or Western medicine kind of failing them. And I feel like with me, my health and wellness journey in my career was kind of parallel to my own health and wellness journey. Ever since I was little, I've always been into fitness and working out, and I would always go down the basement when I was like 5 years old and watch my dad lift. And I would always read his muscle and fitness magazines. And I thought it was so cool seeing people transform their bodies through working out. And it was just something that kind of stuck with me growing up. So when I was a senior in high school, trying to figure out what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, I wanted to do personal training and be a nutritionist. I loved helping people. I loved that whole arena of it. And my dad was kind of more like, I don't know if that's the safest way to go. There might be ebbs and flows with income and whatnot. And he owns his own commercial real estate company, and he was in business. So he's like, maybe you should do business, and kind of that's where you should go. So being, the firstborn people-pleasing personality, I went to Penn State my freshman year. I did business, and I hated every second of it. I would call them every night crying. Like, it wasn't for me. I had no interest in Econ 1 or Econ 2, and I was doing terrible in my business classes, but I was really excelling at the science classes that I was taking. And my mom's a nurse, and she went back to school when my brother and I were in middle school. So I would always be, around her when I was doing my homework and she was studying for her tests. And I would always look at her textbooks and see all these kind of diseases and surgery pictures. And I thought it was so cool. So I'm like, there has to be a common ground where I can kind of pursue my passion, but also make my parents proud. So I'm like, let me just get my bachelor's in nursing. I'm going to do the RN route, and then I'll go for my master's. So as a nurse practitioner, if I wanted to open up my own practice one day, I could. Mm-hmm. So that's what I did. And I went to undergrad and graduate school at Rutgers. And once I graduated, I ended up in dermatology. And I had some pretty amazing mentors in derm, and they really taught me the ins and outs of diagnosing certain diseases and doing surgeries and really just interacting with people. And that was the biggest takeaway I got, how to interact with all different walks of life, all different ages, and really just kind of get to know the person and really figuring out what is going on with them. But early on, because I always had that health and fitness mindset, I noticed that patients that were coming to me that were having flares of eczema or flares of psoriasis or their acne, their lifestyles were kind of all similar. You know, they were either not eating right or under a lot of stress, going to graduate school, you know, all these factors that would then present itself on the skin. So I'm like, there's a connection here somewhere. You know, I don't know exactly 100% what it is, but there's a connection between lifestyle, diet, and what's going on in the body. And when I would go back and forth with my coworkers and my doctors, and I would say stuff, they would be like, "Yeah, no. That's not what is going on here. You know, this is, you know, A, B, C, D. This is how you treat it. Move on to the next patient." So while I was early on in my career, I would go for my certifications and your CEUs and stuff, and everything that I gravitated to was more in the functional medicine world, even though I don't think it was called functional medicine back then. And I went to IIN, precision nutrition certification, got my ACE certifications, my personal training, my group fitness. Like I just kept layering on things that I thought would help me be a better nurse practitioner. And the more I learned about diet and nutrition and the more I learned about supplements, the more I was like, no, I understand and I respect you guys as doctors, but there's a connection here. And in a Western medicine model, my biggest issue was I had 5 to 10 minutes to diagnose, treat, and educate every person that walked in my door. And that is not easy in 5 minutes. So I fought with admin and I was like, please just give me more time. Like I can really help these people. I know that my sole purpose of being here is to help people and educate people and make them really feel better. And I felt like what I was doing helped to a point, but I would always see them come back a few months later and they would have flares again. And I'm like, okay, it has to be me. I don't know what else to do aside from, you know, prescribe another medication or try another treatment process. So I remember, since they wouldn't give me more time with my patients, I wrote a 2-page handout that I gave every single one of my patients. And it was called Heather's Healthy Skin Tips. And it went over an anti-inflammatory diet. It went over supplements to consider taking. It went over stress management and sleep. And this is going back almost 15 years ago. And everyone that came in, I was like, here you go. Just read this. It'll help you. I promise. So that's how my love for integrative and functional wellness kind of took off. And then after being at that practice for 10 years, my husband and I moved to Florida. And I kind of was lost for a little bit because I was at a time in my life and my career where I wasn't happy with the Western medicine picture. So I didn't want to go into another practice that was, you know, seeing 40 to 50 patients a day and kind of just doing the same thing that I've been doing and not really truly helping someone. But I wasn't totally familiar with everything in functional medicine as far as how I would go about practicing that. So there was an opening for a drug research company that did research on dermatology medications that were looking for FDA approval. And at the time I found out what I was pregnant. So I was like, okay, it's still in the dermatology world. It's a different aspect of medicine. It's part-time, it's easy. Let me do it for a little bit. And I found out pretty quickly, ethically, we didn't line up. I mean, I think we both know what big pharma is all about. And it was the same with research. It's all about money. And I'm like, I'm not helping anyone at all. And so I stayed throughout my pregnancy and about 6 months after having Harper. And finally I told my husband, I was like, I can't keep doing this because I'm not making a difference in anyone's life here. I'm not bettering it. And I know that's why I'm supposed to be here. And he was awesome. And he's just like, you know, do what you got to do. So that's when I really looked into functional medicine. And I did 2 modules with IFM. really liked the content, but the learning style, I don't know if you're familiar with kind of how they do it, but it's conferences, and it's like 3 days straight for each module. So I did 2 back to back. So it was 6 days, nonstop learning, all day. And it was just information overload. And I couldn't really absorb it. It was just so much at one time. So while I really did like it, I was like, I need something more. And this was also around the time of the pandemic starting. And Dr. Joseph Arena, who I think you interviewed, was someone that I followed. And I was like, okay, I like this guy's views. Like, we have the same last name. We're both in Florida. We have similar kind of views on health and wellness. I was like, I need to go work for him. So I was looking into him, and, he's on the opposite coast of me. So clearly that was not going to work out. But that's when I found out about IHP. And I went back and forth. I'm like, do I do this? Do I not do this? And I'm like, forget it. I need to learn more. And that's when I did IHP level 1 and level 2. I opened up my own practice called the Wellness Arena. But then I stumbled upon this opportunity with Equalife, and like, what better exposure and experience than, working with Dr. Cabral and working with all you amazing guys. I mean, I'm sure everyone knows, but the health coaches that we have at Equalife are probably some of the most brilliant people that I've ever met. And being in our group meetings twice a week, it's just, you're always learning. We're always learning from each other and trying new things out. And it's a nice environment, and kind of how I ended up here.
Yeah. It's so interesting because like what you kept saying over and over again, I feel like with like people who go into this business, like people who truly become successful coaches, it's wanting to make a difference. And I think there's probably a lot of people who don't have like that burning desire to make a difference in someone's life and truly help them. And not to say that that's like a bad personality trait, but some people just aren't like, they don't feel that deep, and they don't necessarily like have at the end of the day, like that being the thing that gnaws at them. But like you like weren't fulfilled with what you were doing with school. You realized that what you were doing in the dermatology office, like wasn't necessarily making a difference. And even though you had the knowledge and you knew what to do, it was that like I am just not aligned with my purpose here on earth. And that was like what always kind of took you to the next step. And I think listening to that is so huge when we feel it, because I think we can all agree, like as coaches, that's truly like what the best part of what we do is being able to be of service to others. And I have clients that thank me all the time, and I thank them. I'm like, like doing what I get to do, having someone place their trust in me is just as much of a gift as whatever I've given you. So thank you too, because it's this kind of like energetic reciprocal relationship.
Absolutely. And just, I had a client that the Western medicine field was just failing her. She had chronic Lyme, so we know how hard that is in and of itself. And she was just not feeling heard at all. And sometimes just being that ear for someone to like just talk to, and you just to kind of take it all in and acknowledge everything that they're going through, and just listening and supporting them and telling them like, you can get through this and you have the control. It just changes their world. To this day, she still emails me and she's like, I just want to thank you again. You really just made me understand, like, I'm not crazy. It's not all in my head, and that I can do this. And it's that small shift in mindset that can kind of take someone from feeling down in the dumps to someone that's like, wait a second, I know I'm dealing with this, but this doesn't define me, and I can, move past this, and I have the control, and I have that support. And that's a lot of times what's missing. It's the support.
Yes. And I think even though we're adults, we kind of get like programmed to think that we don't necessarily need the same things that children would need. But I so highly disagree in the sense that for somebody who feels like everybody's told them that they're crazy, they have no support, they're down in the dumps, like that body can't heal. Immediately allowing somebody like you who takes that pressure, quite frankly, off their nervous system of being like, okay, like maybe this is possible, like just giving themselves the hope is oftentimes the turning And for so many people, that doesn't come until years down the line of dealing with what they're dealing with.
Absolutely.
But it can be such a shift, a massive shift to where you didn't even give them anything to do yet. You simply just told them, one, they're not crazy, and two, they have the power to change their situation. And that in and of itself changes everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So kind of back to, which is going to kind of segue into our next point. So you talked about how you took a little step back from coaching. You're still our lab accounts manager and you're doing lots of stuff on the app side of things. So you're still very much involved, but a lot of kind of what, you were talking about with your transition was, I think, like instinctual based, where you kind of looking back at least, and probably in the moment, you were just like, this isn't right. There's like something about this is not right. Like I'm meant to do more, be more, whatever it was. And so what kind of caused your shift to take a little bit of a step back from coaching? We'll kind of get into a little bit of a mom chat now.
Yeah.
And what does that look like?
So my entire adult career, I've always defined myself by what I did. I'm Heather, I'm your nurse practitioner. I'm Heather, I'm your health coach. And the biggest issue that I had, whether in dermatology, doing patient care, or health coaching, dealing with clients, is I take everyone's problems or issues and they almost kind of just become me. I care about that person 24/7. I will wake up at 2 a.m. being like, oh my gosh, you know what? Let me reach out to this person and make sure they're following their plan, or let me make sure they're taking their medication the right way. And it literally consumes me. And I thought once I got into more of that health coaching role and being a mom at the same time, it wouldn't be as overwhelming. But because of how much I care, it was a lot. So with Harper, she's our only child. And since having her, so she's 4.5, since having her, I've either just worked part-time, or for a short time, I did work for my father's company. So that was at home. So everything was very flexible. I was always accessible to Harper. She always had me around. And I thought I'd be able to handle full-time mom, full-time wife, full-time daughter, full-time health coach, and lab accounts manager. And I thought I was doing a good job at it until probably 2.5, 3 months into it, Harper started having not outbursts, because it was never an outburst, but accidents at school. She's been potty trained since she was 2, and she'd be awake when she would have these accidents. And I just couldn't understand what was going on. So I would have these meetings with her teacher, and I'm like, is something going on at school? Like, I thought she was like getting picked on at school, or she was getting neglected at school. And her teacher, and I, bless her heart, and I know she didn't mean it, but she was like, well, Harper just sits with me a lot of the day, and she says how much she misses her mommy, and she doesn't see her mommy. And we're just trying to give her the attention that she might not be getting from home. And that was like a dagger in the heart. So I'm like, oh my gosh, here I am thinking I was doing a good job, and I wasn't. I was completely failing, at all aspects, because at that point, then my head was a mess when I would be seeing clients. And when I was with Harper, I wasn't really with Harper because I was thinking about my clients, and it was just a mess. But my ego was like, no, there's women out there that are making, 7 figures, running their own businesses, and, they're posting online all the time, and they have like 4 kids, and they're amazing moms and amazing wives. And I'm like, I'm not that. I'm failing, like all over. I'm failing. And I had to really sit down and be like, okay, is this my ego that's talking? Am I really failing? What is happening? What's the best thing to do for my family? And I spoke about it with Will probably for a good 2 months before talking to everyone at Equal Life. And I was going back and forth with how to make things work and how to divvy up my time the best, and kind of really focus on Harper when I'm with Harper. And we can get so distracted by little things. Our phone is probably one of the biggest distractors in our life. Someone can get in contact with you 24/7, or we can be scrolling on Instagram and it's like 45 minutes later and you're like, what just happened to my day? And so I was trying to make different things work, and things still were not improving at school. So I was like, okay, I'm going to take a step back, because here's the thing. Harper's 4, and I will never get back these years with her. Not that I'll ever get back years, in my career at this point either, but I will never get back this time with her. This is the time that I'm creating a little person that is going to go out there in the world and change the world. And I just want to make sure that I'm giving her the attention that she needs and the support that she needs. And if I have the ability, which I'm lucky and blessed enough to have the ability to take a step back, I need to do it. My career will always be there. I can come back and be an even better coach later on because I'm putting my ego aside and I'm putting my focus on healing my family, healing my daughter, and I'll be able to better relate to moms going through the same struggle. Society puts such pressure on women, and social media creates such false looks into people's lives that it wears on you. I mean, I give credit to teenagers living through this time period, because if I was a teenager when social media was big, I don't know where I would be,
Mm-hmm. Because unfortunately, no matter whether you're a teenager, whether you're a mom, doesn't matter what, a man, you're looking at, for the most part, like the highlights, right? Like literally the 30 second to 4 minute highlight of anybody's given day at any moment in time. And there's, some accounts out there that like their thing is like being like a hot mess mom, but like, even they're funny. And you're like, are you really a hot mess? Cause you're hilarious. And how are you still doing this?
Right.
And so I think it's a forum for comparison. Mm-hmm. And I think if you are somebody that is more susceptible to kind of being down on yourself or not mm-hmm. feeling like you're adding up. And I'm definitely one of those people where it's the worst. It's a double-edged sword, in my opinion. You're able to reach people, you're able to help people with social media, but there's also this aspect where you're also on this end comparing yourself and like, am I doing enough? I could be doing more. And it's just a complete mental, right? Like we talk about like the mom mental load, and you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't, right? If you pull Harper out of school and you keep her at home, like, are you sacrificing on your career end? And if you don't, are you sacrificing? Like we can always feel incredible guilt one way or the other. Mm-hmm. And I think being able to just simply sit and trust ourselves and know that whatever we're doing, whatever we feel is best. And I'm a big believer that like motherly, and I don't mean to say dads don't have this same instinct, but I believe moms is just a notch up. Mm-hmm. Yes. In the sense that we have these instincts that allow us, if we really sit quietly and listen, to go, this is where you need to be now. Mm-hmm. And in a year, it may be that you can be over here and you don't need to be here, and that things are better. But for whatever reason right now, Harper needed you, and listening to that little voice. And yeah, I think you're not only doing something wonderful for her, but you're also kind of honoring an instinct that if you were to try to like stifle that and push it down, it would probably just like come up over here and be louder.
Yeah. And, I think we all go through seasons in our lives. I mean, I'm a huge believer in that. And I believe in God, and I know that every hardship that he has put me through in my life, there's always lessons to be learned. And I know that it may suck going through it, but there's a reason why. So I don't know what that reason is yet, that he put me through this with Harper, but I'll figure it out and I'll be like, okay, that is why this time was so hard. Maybe it was because I had to be like, you know what, Heather, your ego really needs to come down a notch. Like, if you want to be a good health coach and you think taking this time off is not going to make you a good health coach, were you ever really a good health coach then? Mm-hmm. It's that constant struggle, but there's a lesson in all of it. And I'm not telling every person out there, hey, leave your career to go be with your kid. I'm not saying that either, but I'm also saying, listen, if you have an opportunity and you're having a struggle right now, and you really need to sit with yourself, sit with your thoughts, and just realize, I'm not getting this time back with that child at this age. in a few years, Harper's never going to want to hang out with me. I'm not going to be cool to her. She's going to have her like girlfriends and guy friends and want to do that, life. But right now she needs me. Maybe I need this. Maybe this is what I need right now. I need this time. And it's learning. It's a learning lesson. It's not easy. It's hard. And I was just telling you earlier today that, I feel like the more time I spend with her, she's like getting meaner and meaner to me. But again, it's stages and it's just learning how to navigate it. No one gave me a book on this. And that I think is the hardest thing. With motherhood, there is no textbook that I can read that'll really tell you, this is how things are going to be. So
and the truth is like this, in my opinion, this is not how children or mothers were designed to coexist. I think that there's far too much pressure on women to be financially successful. I think the opportunities that we have are amazing, but I think that there's a lot of social and financial pressure, right? There's a societal pressure, but also to make ends meet as a middle-class family in the US today, most would do better if two parents were working, right? If one spouse is making a good income, then the other has flexibility. But I think for a majority of people, it's a two-person income per household.
100%.
And then you're still, for some people, they're still not like, doing incredibly well, but we're still left to do every instinctual biological role that mothers were left to do. However, how do we also balance the work of our careers and still do that in a way that like we actually, I think even women too, I remember when my babies were little and I went back to work, fairly soon. I went back part-time, but I was lucky enough to have my son at my sister's house who didn't live far from work. And I would literally go there on my breaks and nurse him because I didn't want him to have a bottle. And I'm like, he's only 9 weeks old and he wouldn't take a bottle. And like, when I think back of like what I did, but it was my instinct. It was my motherly instinct being like, this is what you need. This is what the baby needs. This is like how you're going to do it. And I just did it. And you'll look back on this in a similar way. And you'll be like, oh, like we got through that. And I don't know like how I made the decision to do what I did, but you just do it out of pure instinct. And again, when you can kind of listen to that motherly instinctual voice inside of you, it tells you a whole lot. And again, in 2 years, it might be like, oh, my instinct is telling me she'd be better off at school. And if that's the case, once she's at school, because you did what you did when she needed it, she probably won't be hanging with the teacher, and the teacher won't need to be giving her attention that she thinks she needs and whatnot. So everything kind of evolves the way that it's supposed to, in its time, and it's different for everyone. And this is why like having social media as a means of comparison is such a downfall, because your life likely looks like nobody else's that you follow on social media, just as mine doesn't look like anybody else's either. And we're all just doing the best we can with what we have in the season that we're in. And if we compare, that's the root of all evil, because
it is, it's the killer, and it's easier said than done, oh, don't compare yourself to this person, or don't compare yourself to that. And that's why if anyone that follows me, they'll see I go rogue from Instagram 4 times. I just deactivate my account. I can't do it anymore. I know myself enough now to say I need a mental break because it's too much. And I realize that I need to do that now because Harper is going to grow up in an era of social media, and I want her to be able to regulate herself, and I want her to not have that comparison, oh, well, this girl looks like that, or that girl looks like that. I don't want that for her. Will she have those pressures from social media? Of course. We had them from magazines growing up. I mean, I compared myself to the Nicole Richies and the Lindsay Lohans and the Paris Hiltons when they were like 90 pounds, and that wasn't me, So that was our comparison, and this will be hers, but I need her to be able to at least see mommy's trying. Mommy's knows her limit, and, these are the things that she's going to do so she doesn't have a complete mental breakdown and compare herself to everyone out there, because it's not real life, and it's not my life. I have my life and they have their life. So
yes. And giving yourself grace and being, honest with, I cry in front of my kids. I do it all the time. I have little mini meltdowns, and some people would be like, oh God, probably makes your kids nervous. But I actually, I don't, I'm like, I'm sad. I'm tired. I'm frustrated. Mommy had a hard day. And so right now it feels good to cry. I'm okay. I don't need you to fix it. I just need to cry, and you don't need to worry about me. But sometimes when you're sad or you're frustrated or you're tired and you didn't get a good night's sleep, you'll cry too. And that's when I'm here for you. And so I think like being real with kids and our emotions and our process allows them, even though like Harper's not necessarily watching you and being like, take note, social media, don't compare myself. She's just simply learning how to relate to pressures of any kind, or, dealing with emotions, or, not dealing with, there's so much that they learn that isn't a direct result of what we think we're teaching them, but it's just simply like emotional intelligence overall that creates so much more flexibility in how they're going to be able to like show up in the world.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the best thing that any parent can do, and, I've been doing this with Harper since she probably was around 2, teaching them when they're caught up in the moment, how to deep breathe, even when they're not caught up in the moment. We practice when Harper's kind of just calm and relaxed, so she can kind of mentally keep that in the back of her mind for when she does get a little bit anxious or overwhelmed. Deep breathing. We do the effective tapping. She loves it. She thinks it's so cool when we watch the videos. I have her in yoga, and she actually came home and taught me the other day. She's like, look what my teacher taught me. And she would take her thumb and put it on every finger. And she goes, peace begins with me. And I just looked at it and I'm like, that little statement, peace begins with me. I mean, that's huge. And I think we could use that. And I was like, Harper, that's amazing. So now like, this is what you could do, when you're upset or you're scared or anything, you just kind of peace begins with me. And these are the tools that I want her to have for when she gets older. I didn't have these tools. I didn't know how to meditate or take some deep breaths when I got overwhelmed. I just kind of had outbursts, But I think each generation we learn more and more, and it's not to the fault of our parents. Our parents were doing the best that they could do and that they knew how to do. But yeah, I think we really need to learn how to equip these kids, and not getting off topic, but that's something I've kind of dived deep in over the past few months with like trauma, whether generational trauma or childhood trauma. And, we have to fix ourselves, so we're not passing this on to future generations. And that's something that I think we all need to focus on, no matter what, no matter how good our childhood was or how bad it was. We all have something that kind of, is with us and can manifest itself over and over again until we learn how to get through it.
Yes. And unfortunately, usually doesn't show up until we become parents ourselves.
Yes.
and then you're busy raising a baby or a human, and it's like over here rearing its ugly head, and you're like, okay, how the heck do I juggle this? But you're right. Like, we don't have to have these overly traumatic childhoods. We can have good upbringings with really wonderful, healthy parent relationships and still carry some sort of child trauma with us that does kind of get magnified when we become parents. And again, it's so brave to like, again, listen to that voice. And, like you said, Harper needed this, but maybe you did too. And oftentimes, even though it seems like maybe the harder choice or the scarier choice, it's usually the one that's going to teach us the most or enlighten us the most. People say to me all the time, like, oh my God, like, how do you do it? Like, oh, you're homeschooling, you're doing this. And the truth is I know what feels like it's the best kind of teaching tools for us. And it's usually, I'm never worried about like anything academic, anything like, oh, how do you know that the kids are like learning what they're supposed to? If they're happy and they're healthy, and they seem like they're well adjusted as far as, they're just simply like their state of being is concerned. Like what else can we really ask for them? And the whole like peace begins with you, or begins inside you. Yeah. I mean, if you could master that, nothing else that happens outside truly could rattle you in a sense that once we always get caught up, we always get in trouble, I think, when we look for things outside of us to fulfill us inside.
Yes.
If we are at peace and fulfilled internally, and I believe that no relationship, marriage, parent, and anything, and then forget like all the other things like, addictions and blah, blah, blah. All of those outside things will always be at the mercy of the stability of the outside stuff if we never master the internal. And I think that is such a part of mothering and teaching our kids and having to kind of go through. And I think it's good when they watch us kind of go through the process, because then they're not left to kind of like perfectionize themselves. And like, I have to stand on my head to like make everybody happy. Like, it's okay for you to have a bad day too. And you'll get through it just like I did.
Yeah, exactly. 100%.
Yeah. Okay. So if everybody's kind of listening to us, I know you said you kind of tend to go rogue on social media, which is if you wanted to share your social media page, you certainly could.
Yeah.
You want
when I'm on and active, it's the Wellness Arena LLC for Instagram.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much for being a guest on the Integrative Health Coach Success Podcast and having such an honest conversation. I think that there's probably lots of working moms who could at least resonate with, our thought process. We didn't necessarily solve any major issues, but I think it's good for moms to just know that other women struggle with this same, like, well, I could work 40 hours a week and make this, or I could work 20 hours a week and make this, but also be there for the people that need me. And so the juggling act, I think it's good to know that we're not alone. So thanks for sharing.
No. Thank you for having me. And we're definitely not alone. And I think more women just need to recognize that and kind of just band together and say it's okay and we'll get through it. We will figure it out. And I think as moms, we always do.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. Thanks, Heather. Thanks for being on the podcast. We'll talk soon.
Of course. Thanks, Julia. Bye.